And if you wish to speak, make sure, please, you turn your microphone on. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for attending this multi-use indoor court facility on the 23rd of July 2020. We'll start firstly with apologies, please. Apologies.
So after last month's meeting, where you had that indicative landscape plan, Warren and Marnie have translated that into the model, because you might remember a few months ago seeing the walkthrough model. So it gives a lot more sense of perspective of sizes and how it's actually going to look. Now, there's still a bit of refinement to do, so we had a meeting with Arapata last Friday, and spent a couple of hours with him at Warren and Marnie's offices, which was very helpful, and we sort of walked him through this whole thing. So he has now gone away and is creating a story about the centre from a cultural perspective, and then he's going to engage an artist to work with Tori and us on refining the landscape. So some of the landscape plans that you'll see, and Richard will talk to that in 2 seconds, they're indicative shapes. So the detailed design won't be done until we've actually worked with Arapata and the artist. But he's doing a story, and it's the same sort of process he did Ruatana for Library. He wrote a story about the significance of the building, and then we got an artist to start to sort of how he could. So he thinks that at the moment, so we only met last Friday, he's pretty tied up for the next 2 weeks, but he's hopeful we'll have everything sort of finalised in terms of ready for approvals by about late September somewhere. That's the sort of the deadline we're working to. So that's just that sort of the context for why we've done this, but it does make it much more useful. And then when we get an artist on board, he or she can then work through the same sort of process with Toria, and then you can actually, because Warren and Marnie kindly put it all on the model, you can actually alter the model to reflect the shapes and everything else. So Richard.
Okay, great, thanks Tony. Thanks Craig. So yes, it was relatively straightforward of us to produce the landscape drawings that Tori tabled last meeting into the 3D model, and I think this makes more sense now that you've been out there yesterday and walked over the job. You get a sense of what's there and what isn't. All the big main parts are there now, as you know, apart from the canopy frame itself, which will be one of the last things they put up when they clear the site. This overall image shows a sense of that Coldstream Road and the slip lane bus drop-off one-way that you see in the immediate foreground, connecting through to the car park extension that we talked about last time across to the hockey field. The blue hockey field on the right is, I think we must have just plonked that in to show that it would fit. That's obviously not there in the immediate future. It's the second hockey ground. So that would just be green field with the swale with those bridges that you see at the moment. So the landscape treatment, series of trees along Coldstream Road, trees in the car park as you see, and then the main event being the way the sort of outdoor room treatment is underneath that canopy structure. Perhaps just before we leave this one, Craig, we've started to give thought to the location of the main building sign, which is that big black guy on the left, which I think is at the moment a bit tall, but he'll probably be about half that height, but starting to get a sense of where that would go. So if we can go through these, Craig, looking from the other way, that sort of 2001 monolith will not be how it is, but we've just sort of started giving thought to it. So the landscape of the car park, a series of trees in in green areas that divide up the car park, and that all drains to that swale on the left that you see.
Just for a sense of perspective, those there yesterday, we were parked about here. When we were at the car park, when we were at high vis vessel, etc. And that entrance way we walked through was that one there.
Which we'll get to in a tick, yeah. So you get a sense that there's those two major car parks. The tennis club will be on the left eventually, and then the various football fields and so on organised around the building. At the moment, it just looks like a aircraft carrier and a paddock, but the sense of that will come over the next few years. Okay, what next? So looking across at the entry, as Craig just mentioned, you've got the main entry in the centre there with the yellow, which takes us through to the main reception and then through into the sports hall, and a sort of secondary entry on the left, a similar version which gets us to the sports house and the shared spaces on the left of that. So two paired entries, and there'll be some signage that we'll organise on those walls shortly, and I think the next couple of slides gets us a bit closer. Sorry, so there's Coldstream Road, gym on the left, main open space on the right, and the aerobics studio straight ahead. I think we go to the left now, Craig, down the building, yeah. So you get a sense of the arrival. Next one. And I think the next three just walk us along the side of that building. So there's a colonnade shelter to walk under. The main entry there. We're just working with Tori and with Arapata about what will happen just on the left of that entry. There's be a seat and a planter and the building signage on that wall to tell you that you've got to where you've set out to get to, and then the gym is on the right. I think the next one's the secondary entry to the sports house on the left. I think that's all we need to say about that. Yep, so it's a similar version of itself, and there may well be a directory talking about who you come to see. The gym on the corner with its sliding shutters so that you can get a sense of looking out to the view but not necessarily looking in. And I think the next sequence will take us around the courtyard, yeah. So the outdoor frame, some seats along the front which are very indicative at the moment. They will have a bit of a shape to them, I think, that Tori talked to last time, a bit more of a form. You might recall that there was talk that the Trust will be organising a temporary sprint training rolled-out piece of AstroTurf in the immediate foreground, outside those doors on the left. And I think, Craig, that goes out the first two bays, pretty much?
It comes out to basically, it stops about there. So it's contained within that frame of the aerobics room.
So, yeah, you get a sense of the canopy, which is set up to cope with PV panels in the future if these do eventuate. Next one, Craig, I think we sort of end up getting down, perhaps the next one again, get down to street level. Yeah, so that's a good one. So looking in from the side, you get a sense of the grid structure of the ground plane. So a series of exposed aggregate panels in each bay with asphalt around the perimeter, and then a sequence of grass, which is the light green, and more shaped planting, which is the dark green, and then these timber seating islands and performance islands, which are set up in the centre there, and there's a flush piece of timber in the middle. And I think we imagine, Craig, that this is how it's going to be, but the detail will be refined.
You know, one of the conversations we had the other day with Arapata is planting, so that's just very indicative planting from a computer-generated plant.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily what will be there, but it'll be something low, and ideally with some sort of movement in the wind, so you get a little bit of a rust and people and frequency that'll be more. And there's still discussion, which is all good, about trees touring, see what the trees up to now. Remember, it doesn't matter about Arapata, we won't move it through in that different part of that design.
So the sense of it's very similar to the canopy outside the library, where there's seating and a sort of an undercroft of trees and shade and so on. In the immediate foreground, that little timbery thing, just indicating these bridge walkovers, the swales, so that there's a direct line in the centre there, and then off to the right to get across that swale, which will be dry most of the time, but obviously this time of year might not be. Yeah, so you get a sense of that it's quite a big space, but divided into these sort of room-like spaces. And I think, Craig, the next lot just take us through see these timber islands just sort of float there with the planters in the middle. I think they look pretty cool. I think the next one gets us down into the, perhaps the next one, what you might experience. There we go. So see those islands are up to about 500 off the ground, which is a sort of seat bench height, and you get a sense of the height of the planting and the grass and so on.
So, sorry to interrupt, Richard and Craig. Is there vehicle access still for move in and out? So that's all
Yep.
all good?
There's still, it's hard to see on this clear slide, but basically there's still room there to get trucks in for loading gear and food trucks. I can't remember the metres. It's
6 by 9, I think they were, or 6 by 8 or something. Yeah.
It doesn't look it. No, that's what I thought.
Yep. I think the next lot just give us further views of this. Yeah. So those, the exact size and positioning of those guys in the foreground, which are a sort of a concrete base with a timber top, they have yet to be fully worked through, but this, you get a sense of how they'll be. And I think the next lot just take us through, yeah, get underneath and you get a sense of that. Sure.
Just a quick question. With those grids up there, those like louvers, have that been tested for windage or noise if it's really, really windy? Does that have any effect if, I'm not sure, but does it have any effect if it's really, really windy?
We have worked through with the supplier that very question, so it's in their mix. I mean, we haven't done, simulated testing or anything like that, but the question has been asked early in the contract.
Part of the design of this includes, so the engineers actually will give us a certificate at the end, PS1, on robustness and wind as well, because that's obviously been a factor in terms of our noise scales, and that will be quite exposed to it. There could be some noise from it, but our best advice at the moment is, without doing the modelling, which would cost us thousands, because they'd actually have to replicate this and do a whole model. We got a quote with 3,500 or something, and even then they said that wouldn't be that would be indicative only, and they need to get a whole laboratory type setup, which we didn't even get a price for. But I don't think it should be too much of an issue. We've been very careful about the robustness and also the height of it, and with the amount of soundproofing around the courts, I don't think any noise is going to transfer in. The Kaipoi one, you do get some noise in Kaipoi Reef, which we're working with the acoustic guys at the moment, but that's actually nothing to do with the canopy. That's actually a grill around the heat pump upstairs, which we're working to resolve at the moment, but this is very robust.
I just happened to know that Greg had louvers in his property at Fernside, and they took them out because it got really noisy, and so I would just ask that question.
These are quite you can't tell from this sketch, but these are actually quite big and quite robust, and they don't adjust. So the adjustable ones actually are more prone to noise because they're more flexible. These are actually rigid, so there is no angular. We've got the mouse there. That angle won't change. Very similar to the ones we've got around outside Ringura Library, and they've been up there for 20 whatever years now, built in 96, and we've never had any trouble with those. But I think the flexible ones do have, and I certainly know of other people with similar experiences with that.
Yeah, it's yeah, and they're not light enough to drum in a wind like those smaller ones are. I mean, the Kaipa ones are very similar, and not a lot of noise come out of there. Yep. Okay, I think there's only a couple more, Craig. Yeah, so they're just various views of the same thing that gives us a sense of that. The others give us a look from the inside.
That's quite good, actually, seeing what you'll see when you're in there.
So that's the last one, that just looking out from the sports hall to the north. So you get a sense that it'll be fine with large groups of people, but also with small groups, just during the week. And I think that's us, Craig.
Just one thing I'd like to ask, please. With all the cars you've got in your car park, I don't see a yellow V-dub.
We weren't allowed no advertising on the cars. Yeah. The architect's jalopy is not there either, you're right.
It's not designed for public to, it's designed to open up to get good stuff on there. Sports awards don't even bring the stage, and that's something, that's what they're doing.
Yes, could we go back to the front where it's got the panels? Those panels are at the front of the sports gym there. Remember, I asked a wee while ago.
Yeah, about timber or aluminium. Is that your
Yes, so
question?
what have we resolved on that?
It was aluminium.
It was,
Yeah,
yep,
had
thank
been-
you.
Had been changed a long time ago.
Thank you, I just couldn't remember what
Those
we
are they?
agreed.
Yep, powder coated aluminium.
Everybody happy? Yeah.
This now, what we'll do is we'll use this presentation here to work with the trust staff to get their feedback, and then we'll refine it with Arapata and see where we get to on what we actually do. So I wanted these images because it's actually much easier to talk to the images than the plan. We'll have the plan as well. But now we've got those, we'll arrange a meeting with Rosie and Michael, etc., and work through that. And we'll have Tori at that, and she's got all the detailed measurements of how big all the gaps are, because that's what the trust staff need to know, really. But just one other thing that yesterday that so that'll give a sense of perspective when you go inside as well. Are there any other questions from Richard?
Well done, Richard. Thank you very much. Yes, big tick. Right, we'll move on now for the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Yep. So if someone, what do you got there? Someone like to move that these minutes are a true and correct record, please? Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Seconder, please. Thank you. Councillor Ward. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Now, any matters arising from the minutes, please? Nothing? Right, we'll move on then. We'll go to the project manager's report, please.
Thanks. As mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, we've met with Arapata, so we're following that through. We've also had a first discussion with the key trust staff on a naming sponsorship policy, because under our heads of agreement, which doesn't affect the architects and engineers here, etc., but under our heads of agreement with the trust, the council has an obligation to produce a naming and sponsorship naming rights policy or agreement, and I've done a first draft of that. We've met with and it was really helpful discussion because we went through everything that needed to be covered, and I've still got a bit of refinement to do to that, just other points. We all got agreement around the table of what needed to be in there. There was no disagreement. It was just that more things I need to put in that I hadn't thought of before, which is why we had that preliminary discussion. So I'll refine that and then I'll circulate that to Chris, etc. And what we'll do probably the next meeting of this group, I thought at the end of it, if the councillors, mayor, etc., could stay behind, then we could do a briefing with that before it goes up to council, because it's important that we get some ownership, but it really only affects the councillors and mayor and Chris, etc. So we'll work that through and then get it up to council, but so far that's progressing quite well. The only other couple of things, we're still working through on detail of finishes inside. I mean, while it's all specified, when you go to order things, there's always some interesting developments. One of them has occurred is that the indoor courts itself, because of fire regulations, have to have a special fire retardant coating on the ply that's being used. Now, when we specified that, that was quite doable and wasn't a problem, but it's turned out that the application of that coating has changed, and how you used to be able to apply it, you can't now. It won't be guaranteed or won't be warranted. So we're just looking at alternatives, because originally we've used it at Kaiapoi actually as well. We used a fireproof product called Decotec, which Warramani specified, and we've already got Decotec in some of the ceilings. It would be more robust around the gym, but it is dearer. But now we're doing an exercise to see how much dearer it actually is, because we're concerned of the way this coating has to be applied, what maintenance regime that would bring. So it may be more cost effective to spend a bit more and not have the maintenance, because the maintenance on the Decotec is just washing it really. So we're doing some work on that now, and we'll bring something back to next meeting. It's certainly worth exploring. But that's about the last thing I think that's sort of left. Everything else has been ordered and confirmed, but it was just working with Dulux. Dulux actually took over. It used to be a resine product, and Dulux have bought that and changed the recipe. No, but so we're working through that. But if we could get a better product, then we'll certainly bring something back to consider for next meeting. We've made a few minor changes to ceiling finishes, like we've removed some ceilings in the store. We needed very minor, but and changed around a couple of ceiling finishes in the admin area. So that'll come back at next month's meeting as well with the cost saving. But we're probably looking in the vicinity of about 25,000, somewhere like that. But that's about it. Like, don't expect each month we'll be coming up with, because we've been right through. And I mean, it's actually been helpful. Lockdown was helpful, but it did enable a lot of this detail to get worked through a bit earlier than otherwise we would have been able to. So everything is now confirmed really. So I think that's basically the end of any savings. And the Decotec, wall panelling is about the last thing left to order. Blinds are ordered, everything else is ordered and designed. So we're pretty well through, which should help us hopefully in terms of delivery, because Lee's are trying their best to get orders out in advance and get stuff on site. So we don't get delivery delays, but no one can guarantee that at the moment, but they certainly are working as hard as they can to try and get stuff through. The only other thing is we've submitted the building consent amendment for the design of the juice bar reception area. There was just some minor amendments we had to do to that. We withdrew it from the contract at the time, and we just left a provisional summon because there were still some issues about accessibility. Anyway, that's all been resolved. And some of those issues were how the building actually operates and how many people would actually be queuing at the desk to get tickets and things. So we've worked through that, and it's basically more or less unchanged, and that's been submitted to the council and has been and we've had an oral indication from the building unit that it's all okay. We haven't had anything in writing yet, but we'll get that. And otherwise, I think all is going pretty well. Happy to answer any questions that anyone's got.
Anyone? Questions? Thank you.
Craig, the material that you just were talking about at the start, any indication of difference in cost at this point?
No, because we've got to do two cost comparisons, Dan. I'd love to have a difference, but we've got to get the cost of what it would cost to actually put the existing material, because now they're saying to get the finish, it has to be applied off-site in controlled conditions and then erected. So that's going to cost more than was originally planned. So we need to find out what that's going to cost and then what the new one will cost, because the new one comes pre-treated and you just put it up as sheets. So we'll work that through. But we won't have made any. Just like it'll come back to you for decision making next month. It won't be nothing will have happened in that time, except we'll have done some more exploring.
Can I
Richard,
please?
did you want to comment?
Oh, sorry.
Well,
No.
just to clarify, so Dan, the material is at the high level in the sports hall, and it's the panels where the acoustic panels are not. And those with long memories might remember that they're there for a cost-saving reason, ironically enough. So was early on we had the same acoustic panel going right through, continuous treatment, and we reduced the quantity of that and added back this painted ply to save a bit of money. Now it's turning into a thing that needs interrogating. But in terms of what Craig's talked to, the area of it is not very big. It's sort of every other panel or whatever, isn't it? Yeah, and it's a long way up.
And one of the cost comparisons we'll do is whether we just go back to the original Plan A of the acoustic panels. So, you know, I'll come back next month with a proper report with those costs, but it's worth spending time on to see what we can do, because the acoustic panels could well be the cheapest option, almost. So, you know, yeah.
Any other questions? I'd just like to say thank you very much, Craig, for that report. It's very good, and I really appreciate the work that you've put in, and Lee's getting everything ordered and well in advance. And it's just looking at that pile there of building material that's ready to go up. It just shows the foresight and having everything prepared beforehand. So thank you very much. Second it. Thank you. Do you wish to speak? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Financial report number 8, up to the 16th of July. Yep.
Before you start, sorry, I should have said one other thing. Sorry, it's my fault, but just introducing the financial report, which Ross is more than capable of doing, obviously, because it's his report. But we have started some work with the consultants and the design on the additional car park, which is adjoining the hockey car park. But that's not part of this $28 million project. There's a separate budget. The council voted for that of $1 million. So in future reports, as we start to expend that money, we'll do that as a separate add-on at the end. So we're not going to merge the two. So we'll keep this with the lease contract, and when we do the additional West car park, it'll probably be a variation to Lee's contract, but we'll keep that separate. And I've already talked with Lee's, and they're happy to invoice that separately, so we can keep it separate track.
Yep.
Thanks, Ross. Sorry.
Okay, executive summary. Construction budget, of course, is the 24.866 million. Progress payments, payment claims 1 to 10 have been certified. A total of 8.673 amount to date. Under construction contingency, we now have Type B instructions, estimated cost of 379,000 and approved at 83. So a forecast contingency expenditure of 463,000. This forecast expenditure represents approximately 36% of the construction contingency budget of the 1.271. And interesting to note that we've actually paid 36% of the contract price in the progress claim, so it's quite interesting. And that also includes the COVID claim, which is good. So the forecast contingency expenditure has decreased by circa 26,000 this month. The most significant changes are the architectural tender to construction changes. We were able to negotiate that down by 49,000, and the reduced site strip cost came down by 7,000, which was great. The soak pit final cost cost $11,000 more. There was a change to the slot drain type, which saved $6,000. And there was a change to some petition head connection details, which cost $17,000. And hollow rats and mice adding up to 8 is the balance. So a total saving of 26 in a month, which is great. And hopefully we can do that again next month, as you say, Craig. Over the page, risk. The impact of COVID-19 outbreak on material procurement and program, that's reduced considerably. And the cost of the additional landscaping, as Craig has just mentioned, is not actually a risk, it's just outside, it's a separate contract. The actual cash flow still appears to be falling behind, and we still need to get a revised program from the contractor. I don't believe we've got that yet, Andy? No. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, the rest is detail. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions, please? Yes.
Sorry for my ignorance, but type B instructions refers, when you say type B,
Type B means there's a cost involved versus type A,
right,
which is information only.
so it's the ones that are on the back.
Yeah, so
summary,
they're all type B until we actually get an approved variation for the project manager to say that's the final cost.
So Craig, you might have covered this at the last meeting, but Covert Costs, how much is that? Is it additional costs?
119,000.
Yep.
And we did talk about last meeting, it's fine, but, no, I know, but what we said last meeting, Dan, was that we were quite pleased with the transparency of Lee's in terms of they itemised all of the costs on a spreadsheet that they could have charged us, which was roughly, from memory, about 176,000. And then they discounted plant they owned, they didn't charge for, they took the profit out of it, so they weren't charging us profit. They also showed the government wage subsidy, and that brought it down to 119,000. And then Ross and his team worked through that kind of detail, and everyone agreed in the end that was a fair and reasonable. So Jim signed that off as part of the last claim. It's actually cash has been paid to them now, that last claim.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Sorry, just a quick question, Ross. The cash flow forecast. So our assumption would be that they would maintain that green curve, but
Yes.
reset at the red line. So that would take us beyond completion by perhaps
That's-
longer than what they're telling
That's
us
what
at
it
the moment.
indicates, correct.
Yeah, 'cause
Unless
they
they
won't-
can,
they
unless they can
won't.
accelerate and catch up somewhere.
Which we don't think they will,
Right.
probably, right?
Unsure.
Yeah.
It does tend to indicate that it would be longer.
Yeah.
They, Lee's, we've asked them, and they're working through, they actually are working on it at the moment, but what they're trying to do is also work out when their supplies will actually come, so while they're ordering, so that cash flow forecast is actually a little bit of work in there, because we've asked them to fast track ordering, so they're trying to work out when supply is expected, and then they're going to modify. So that green line there is the original one we had at the start of the contract from them, and it hasn't been modified. So Rich is right, it's got to extend out another month anyway, but it may not go in such a curve like that. It could have some bumps in it along the way, depending on as materials arrive. So Jonathan Ives, who's the quantity surveyor, is working on it at the moment, but last time I talked to him, which is about 10 days ago, something, and isn't it, we talked about it, he was still waiting then to get sort of confirmed when we're likely to actually pay for some of these things that are coming, particularly things like the flooring and that have significant cash flow implications.
Question from me, sort of just almost picking up on what Craig was mentioning in the COVID response, and while you didn't identify or flag any key concerns in your report, Craig, about that. The last time we met, we talked about the floor coming from the States, and I think there was componentry out of Italy too. Was it for?
It's the flooring, the wooden floor for
Yes.
the sports hall, the indoor
Yeah.
courts, and there's floor tiles, and there's the mechanical plant, and the mechanical plant is Europe.
Yeah, just, I take it we have no update from our previous advice as to COVID impact on delivery at this time?
No, that's
No
what
is
they're
the
waiting on.
answer.
Andy.
Yeah, no, I've had no response yet in terms of no acknowledgement that anything's in shipment. So sort of just orders have been placed, but I've had no knowledge that I've got no knowledge that there's anything in shipment at the moment.
So mechanical plant out of Italy, did you say? You're not going to have the same issues.
It's out of Europe,
Right.
because basically there's no mechanical plant made in New Zealand effectively. So it all leaves from Europe somewhere, and China's involved.
I'm not worried about that necessarily, but we're not. But just making sure we don't have the same issues we had with Rangiora Town Hall, with mechanical plant and then being able to get it serviced at parts.
I think that the short answer is hopefully no. The difficulty we had with Rangiora Town Hall originally was that to specify a plant that fitted within that cavity, because that is now 6-8 years ago, whenever it was, and plant design keeps changing, but at the time there was only one supplier who actually made plant that would fit within the available space. Here we've designed the space to fit the equipment. So Pal Fenwick did the design first, and we actually have plenty of room, I suppose, exaggeration, on the mezzanine on the roof where it's going. If in the future, because we're looking at a 50-year lifespan, the plant won't last 50 years, but when there is a need for replacement, there's flexibility in terms of the spacing. So we haven't designed anything that's built into a tight corner, so it is potentially okay to any replacement would be needed.
I mean to question, but it's just that it's cost us a lot of money to remedy this. So parts and sourcing, if needed, it's all can be obtained here.
Sharpen out of Auckland. So it's fabricated and manufactured in Europe, but actually the service and maintenance and spares come out of Auckland. Correct.
When I talked to Reese about it, it's in layman's terms, he talked about it as more of a Toyota type plant rather than a Mercedes, in terms of it's readily serviceable, common parts, and it's not that nothing uncommon with it.
Just regarding back to the wooden floors and floor tiles, you haven't heard anything back from USA?
They've all confirmed, I mean, Lee's have confirmed all the orders, and there's been no indication there's no supply, but we haven't got, well, as far as Andy and I know, they haven't got any dates yet confirmed of when delivery is expected. They're waiting on that, but I don't think they've got anything yet. But they're trying, Jonathan is chasing it up, chasing all of them up, because they're very mindful of at the moment they've built in a considerable lead time because they've asked for stuff to be on site a lot earlier than is actually needed, but we don't know if that's going to be met or not yet. So as soon as we do, we'll let you know.
Thank you. Just the way things are going over there, it's a big question mark. Right, now if there's no more questions, would someone like to move this financial report, please? Thank you.
Happy to move, we accept it.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay, thank you. General business, please. Anyone have any general business they wish to discuss?
I've just
Yes.
got a simple question, please. Yeah, I know, it'll be simple. We'll see. Well, that's always my response when clients ask me. The exit door out of the store, past the storeroom, so the main corridor, will exit, so that's an emergency exit, which in theory will exit into the compound or not, or is it outside the compound? Okay, so it's, okay, right, that was, I thought about that this morning. I thought, hold on, we can get into the compound, but then they're locked in the compound.
There'll be, in that exit door, the only people likely to use it are people who are in the storeroom or in the plant room, because if you're in the indoor courts, you're going to come out the indoor court ones. It could be that end changing room may use it if people are in there, but it won't be a big number because the indoor court people, as it were, the people who are actually on the courts will go out other exit doors.
Just to say thank you, Craig, for organising yesterday. It was excellent being able to go and have a look through, and compliments to the contractor. I know they probably had, well, we were told they had a good tidy up before we went through, but it is, it's an impressive building. So to our architects and to all that are involved in it, thanks for, it's going to be amazing for our community. Been a lot of interest as all of us that drive along have been looking at it, so it was nice to actually be able to go through and have a look. So well done. It's going to be a fantastic asset. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, and we will arrange another one. I mean, I think probably the next site visit will be quite good when it's enclosed, because when the rest of the roof's on and framing up, when you see the indoor court actually enclosed, and you get a much clearer idea of the actual spaces because they'll all be defined, so we'll arrange. And it will also be easier because we'll be into the summer period where it's daylight, so we can potentially do it at 4:35 or whatever, which it's easier for Lees. I mean, they've been Carl has been very accommodating. He didn't hesitate when I asked, but I mean, they did actually have to stop work and keep people off site. So I'd like to minimise that, but it will be, as I said, when there's natural daylight, it'll be quite easy to get on site, 5 or something like that. And so we'll keep that. I certainly think we want to get another opportunity before, certainly before Christmas. I'm hopeful somewhere around October, November somewhere.
So the flooring is being laid today, or the concrete, special concrete. Fabulous. Big area. Oops. They're basically on track, but the timing has changed a bit because of weather. Because when it's the polished concrete, you have to get a higher degree of finish with that than you do with the rest. So they've been very mindful of working through what's the high finish areas and what the weather's like for that. So they've restaged the original plan for how they laid flooring, but they're basically on track at the moment. And there's been the weather has affected the concrete a bit in terms of the staging of timing, but they've basically managed to carry on working mostly, which has been really good. So,
can I just say, I thought the concrete work finish yesterday looked really good quality, and that was quite encouraging to see slabs that large laid that at the moment didn't have much deformation in them or cracking or what have you, which possibly will come, but it as it continues to cure, but it looked really well done. So that will be an asset. Hopefully we don't get a decent shake, which would put some lines through it, like you see through many other concrete slabs across Canterbury.
Just on the expected opening, is there any? Are we still on track for July finish? Is it?
as far as anyone knows, yes. I mean, it's a year away effectively still. So it was their estimate that they're a month later. So they're saying at the moment the agreed completion date now is the 21st of June. Next year it was May 19th or 17th or something. So it's basically a month later, and then we're estimating that the trust needs to get in and do fit out, so that's why we're sort of talking about a July opening. But as we get closer, we'll be able to refine that a bit more. But I think in terms of any community messaging, it's probably safer to be saying late July opening.
Richard, just a last question, please, with your update. Is that will that be available on for people to look at? Yes.
Yeah, I would
Or do you not want to do it?
No, I'd quite like to. I've had a talk with Alistair about that. We'll certainly use them to work through the trust. There's quite a lot of refinement to happen yet, because particularly those seats, they're there as blobs at the moment, and I think in terms of keeping faith with Arapata, I would quite like to keep them, because what we've agreed is that he will come back to us, and then we're going to work on that refinement, because the trees could change shape. Some of that planting could change. The seats will change. I guarantee that. It's just a question of how they change. So I'd rather, if that's okay, rather just keep it to us. I mean, you've seen it. And I said I'll use it as a working document with the trust, but I'd rather retain possession of that
that's
until
fine.
we've worked with Arapata, because I think there will be. And also we'd like to get, Richard and his team are working with us at the moment on how we have signage portrayed and where that goes. So, just getting that a bit more refined before we let it out. But particularly those seats on the front facing Coldstream Road, I think Tori would be concerned if they were out in the public at the moment, because it's not how they'll actually look. No. They're indicative, and it's indicative size, but she doesn't want to do any more work on them until we've got, because I know Arapata's quite keen to get something into that concrete of some shape. So I think if we could just wait a little bit.
No, that's fine. It's just they have been asked that, when is it available to
No, I know
to
there's
be
a lot of
viewing
interest,
it.
but
And
I'm
that was
just a bit,
really interesting today. Just to actually see it like that. But anyway, that's good. It's
But
all-
you know,
just
thinking
wait and
about what you
see.
said, we could probably put, I'll talk to Alistair, we could probably put a couple of the car park things, because they're not going to change. So there are some of those shots we could use, because the car park is all, it is what it is. It's not going to change, so we could do some of that. But I think all of that landscaping around the actual canopy area, we need to just sort of keep in work. And no, and the car park thing, I think we're not going to change.